Melissa Ironvale thought Garrick saved her from a monster. For 6 months, she built a foundation saving kids from relatives who robbed them, finally living the life her mother died trying to give her. But when her eyes started glowing silver and mysterious accidents began targeting everyone she cared about, Melissa asked her grandfather one question that shattered everything. What else about my mother didn't you tell me? If you've ever been lied to by someone who claimed it was for your own good, this story will hit different. This is about betrayals wrapped in protection, legacies built on silence, and one young woman's fight to survive the truth her family died keeping from her. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section what time it is and where you are watching from. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the story. Now, let's continue. Melissa stood before floor-to-ceiling windows in the Ironvale Foundation headquarters. Behind her, the walls were lined with 43 case files, each one a child she'd helped rescue from relatives who stole their inheritance. At 18 years old, with her dark brown hair pulled into a neat bun and tanned complexion contrasting against the sleek modern office, she had built something meaningful in just 6 months. Her influence was growing, featured in local news, praised by city council members, finally claiming the legacy Sophia had stolen. But on this crisp summer evening, none of that felt safe anymore. Melissa's fingers traced the edge of the latest incident report, her mind refusing to accept what the pattern was telling her. 3 accidents in 2 weeks, all targeting the foundation. The first had seemed random, a staff member's car veering off the road on a clear, dry morning. The police report cited driver error, but Sarah had been driving for 15 years without so much as a fender bender. She'd walked away with bruises and a story that made no sense. The brakes just stopped responding, like something cut the line. The second incident was harder to dismiss. A fire in the records room at 2 a.m, right where they kept the files on their most high-profile cases. The fire marshal called it electrical, but the foundation's wiring had been inspected and updated just 3 months ago. And the security cameras? All showed static for exactly the 12 minutes the fire burned. Now this. A child they'd rescued last month, 8-year-old Marcus, whose uncle had been stealing his disability payments, had vanished from his foster home for 3 hours yesterday. When he was found wandering 2 blocks away, he couldn't explain where he'd been. But he'd whispered something to his caseworker that made James escalate the report to Melissa immediately. The Pale people asked about Miss Ironvale. They wanted to know if she was like them. Melissa set the report down and caught her reflection in the darkening window. For just a moment, her eyes weren't brown. They were silver, bright, metallic, inhuman. She blinked hard, and the color was gone. But her hands were shaking. It had started small. A flicker in the bathroom mirror 3 weeks ago that she'd convinced herself was a trick of the light. Then it happened during a board meeting. She'd seen it reflected in her coffee cup, silver bleeding through brown like oil on water. One of the board members had stared at her strangely, and she'd excused herself, heart hammering. Now it was happening multiple times a day. And it wasn't the only thing. Yesterday, she grabbed a door handle and felt the metal bend under her grip. She'd had to pry her fingers off before it snapped completely, leaving finger-shaped dents in solid brass. This morning, she'd heard the janitor's phone conversation from 4 floors down as clearly as if he'd been standing beside her. And the dreams. God, the dreams. Every night for 2 weeks, the same nightmare. Her mother's face, terror in her eyes, reaching for someone in the passenger seat. The screech of tires, metal crumpling. And in the background, always in the background, a figure standing on the roadside. Watching. Waiting. Melissa pulled her gaze from the window and looked at the photograph on her desk. Her mother, Lauren, holding newborn Melissa in the hospital. Her mother's eyes in the photo were warm brown, exactly like Melissa's had been her entire life. Until 6 weeks ago. She'd asked Garrick about it.
Twice.
Both times, he changed the subject with practiced ease, assuring her it was probably stress, perhaps a vitamin deficiency, nothing to worry about. He'd suggested she take a vacation, maybe step back from the foundation for a while. But his eyes had held something that looked like fear. And now children were being questioned by pale people who wanted to know if Melissa was like them. Melissa's phone buzzed. A text from James. Need you to see something. Security footage from last night. Conference room.
Now.
She grabbed her jacket, her reflection forgotten, unaware that across the city, a blood-sealed letter had just arrived at the Ironvale estate. Unaware that she had 30 days to live. The letter had arrived at sunset, delivered by a courier who vanished before the estate guards could ask his name. Nathaniel had brought it to Garrick's study without a word, placed it on the centuries-old desk, and stepped back with the careful distance of a man who recognized a death warrant when he saw one. Garrick stared at the blood-red wax seal for a full minute before breaking it. The symbol pressed into the wax was unmistakable, a crown pierced by 3 daggers, rendered in such precise detail that Garrick could make out the individual drops of blood carved into the design. The mark of the Covenant's High Council. He'd seen it only twice before in 500 years, once when they'd granted him dominion over the Eastern Territories, and once when they'd taken his daughter from him. His hands remained steady as he unfolded the parchment, real parchment, not paper, because the Covenant clung to the old ways with the same fervor they clung to their absolute power. The message was written in elegant calligraphy, each letter formed with the kind of precision that came from centuries of practice. The half-blood has been awakened. This violates the mandate of separation and poses an unacceptable risk to our preservation. You have 30 days to ensure containment through the ritual of severance, or we will handle the matter through traditional means. The Covenant does not forget, Lord Ironvale. We do not forgive. And we do not allow loose ends to threaten what we have built. You protected her once by keeping her hidden and powerless. You will protect our kind now by ensuring she remains that way. 30 days. Use them wisely. There was no signature. The Covenant never signed their edicts. Their authority was assumed, absolute, and 5 centuries old. Garrick set the letter down with the same careful control he'd maintained through plagues, wars, and the slow death of empires. But Nathaniel, who'd known him for 300 years, saw the minute tremor in his jaw. When did they find out? Garrick's voice was quiet, measured, and utterly cold. She's been too visible, Nathaniel said, moving closer to the desk. The Foundation's public profile, her face in the news, city council meetings, someone was bound to notice she looks exactly like Lauren. And there have been reports. What kind of reports? Power fluctuations. Witnesses who swear they saw her eyes change color for a split second. Small things, but enough to raise questions in certain circles. Nathaniel's expression darkened. The Covenant has informants everywhere, Garrick. Once they started watching her, it was only a matter of time. Garrick stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the estate gardens. Beyond the manicured grounds, the city sprawled in electric brilliance, a world Melissa had just begun to claim as her own. A world that would be her execution ground in 30 days if he didn't stop it. I've spent 18 years keeping her invisible, he said, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. Hidden in poverty with Sophia, powerless and unknown. I let her suffer because I knew the moment I pulled her into this world, into visibility, they would notice. And I did it anyway. You saved her from dying on the streets. I painted a target on her back. Garrick's hands clenched at his sides. Sophia's greed was a monster I could destroy with money and influence. I could dismantle her life, restore Melissa's inheritance, Give her the future Lauren wanted. That was a problem I knew how to solve. He turned from the window, his pale eyes meeting Nathaniel's. But the Covenant isn't Sophia. They're not motivated by greed or spite or human weakness. They're an institution that survived 1,000 years by eliminating anyone who threatens their secrecy. And Melissa, a half-blood who's thriving in the public eye, building influence, awakening powers, she's everything they've spent centuries making sure never exists. She's proof their rules can be broken, Nathaniel said quietly. She's proof that vampires can choose differently. That we can love humans, can create life with them, can step away from the Covenant's control and build something new. Garrick's voice dropped. That's why they saw Lauren as a threat. Not because she married a human. That's happened before. But because she chose mortality, chose to raise a child outside their system, and was succeeding. And now Melissa is proving half-bloods can not only survive but thrive. Which makes her the most dangerous person in their world. Garrick looked down at the letter, at those elegant, merciless words. For the first time in 500 years, Nathaniel, I'm facing an enemy I can't buy, can't intimidate, and can't outmaneuver. And they've given me 30 days to destroy my granddaughter's future, or watch them destroy her. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. Are you going to tell her? Garrick closed his eyes. 30 days. I don't know. The security footage from 3 nights ago showed exactly 4 seconds of impossible. Melissa watched James replay it for the 3rd time, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m., long after the building should have been empty. The camera angle captured the foundation's main entrance, the reception desk, the darkened hallway beyond. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then a figure stepped into frame.
Not walked. Stepped.
As if they'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Pale beyond any natural complexion, wearing clothes that looked expensive and oddly formal. They stood perfectly still, facing the camera with eyes that caught the infrared light and reflected it back like mirrors. Then they were gone. No exit. No movement toward the doors. Just there, then not. Police? Melissa asked, though she already knew the answer. Called them yesterday. They said it's a camera glitch. James's jaw tightened. But I've worked security for 15 years. That's not a glitch. That's someone who knew exactly where the cameras were and wanted us to see them anyway. A message. A warning. Melissa set down her coffee, trying to ignore the way her hands wanted to shake. Increase security for tonight's gala. Double the cameras. I want. Already done. And I've hired 4 additional guards. James hesitated. Ms. Ironvale, maybe you should consider postponing. If someone's targeting the foundation. We're not postponing. Melissa's voice came out firmer than she felt. We've got 50 major donors coming tonight, including 3 city council members. We cancel now. We lose momentum we can't afford to lose. What she didn't say, we cancel, and whoever is hunting me wins. The Grand Hotel's ballroom glittered with the kind of wealth Melissa was still learning to navigate. Crystal chandeliers. String quartet. Waitstaff circulating with champagne that probably cost more per bottle than a week's worth of foundation supplies. 50 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits, all here to celebrate the Ironvale Foundation's 6-month anniversary. 43 children rescued. 12 families prosecuted for financial exploitation. Recognition from the mayor's office. Melissa moved through the crowd in a midnight blue dress that Garrick had insisted on buying, accepting congratulations and making small talk with donors while her security instincts screamed that something was wrong. James stood near the entrance, eyes constantly scanning. The additional guards were positioned at every exit. The cameras were recording everything. But Melissa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by eyes that didn't show up on camera. To the woman of the hour, a councilwoman said, pressing a champagne flute into Melissa's hand. 6 months and already changing lives. Your mother would be so proud. Melissa smiled, accepted the toast, brought the glass to her lips. The first sip tasted like celebration, bubbles and expensive fruit, and the promise of a future she'd built from nothing. The second sip tasted like almonds and metal and wrongness. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Every muscle locked. Her throat closed. Then something inside her, something she'd never felt before, surged with violent force. The toxin tried to enter her bloodstream. Her body expelled it like a foreign invader. Melissa doubled over, champagne and poison hitting the marble floor in a spray of pink-tinged liquid. Gasps erupted around her. Hands reached to steady her. Someone screamed for a doctor. But Melissa wasn't dying. She was changing. Heat flooded her veins, not painful, but intense, like her blood had caught fire. Her vision sharpened until she could see individual dust particles floating in the chandelier light. She could hear hearts beating, 50 different rhythms, and underneath it all, one heartbeat that was too slow, too controlled. The poisoner was still in the room. Melissa straightened, and the crowd stepped back, because her eyes were blazing silver. Not flickering, not a trick of the light. Fully, unmistakably, inhumanly silver, bright enough to reflect in the horrified faces around her. Melissa, James was there, his hand on her elbow, his voice low and urgent. We need to get you out of here.
Now.
But she was scanning the crowd, looking for the wrong heartbeat, the too still figure, the person who'd just tried to kill her.
There.
Near the bar, a man in an immaculate suit, watching her with clinical interest. His skin was the same impossible pale as the figure in the security footage. His eyes held no fear, no surprise. Only assessment. He'd poisoned her to see what would happen. And now he had his answer. The man inclined his head, almost to bow, and walked toward the exit with the unhurried pace of someone who'd accomplished exactly what they came for. Melissa took a step to follow, but her legs gave out. James caught her before she hit the floor, and the last thing she saw before the silver faded from her vision was the flash of camera phones. 50 witnesses. 50 recordings. And somewhere in the vampire world, someone was already watching the footage of Lauren's half-blood daughter, proving she was everything the Covenant feared. Melissa woke in her apartment with no memory of leaving the gala. The clock read 11:47 p.m. She was still wearing the midnight blue dress, her head stuffed with cotton and her mouth tasting like copper. Her phone screen showed 63 missed calls and 100 texts with subject lines that made her stomach drop. James had sent one message: got you home safe. Don't watch the videos.
She watched them anyway.
Shaky phone footage of her eyes blazing silver, bright enough to cast shadows on horrified faces. The first video had 3,000 shares. The second had 5. Comments ranged from CGI to contact lenses to I was there and that was real. Her apartment went cold. Not gradually. Instantly. Like someone had opened a window to January, except it was June and all her windows were closed. You should rest. The voice came from her living room, smooth, ageless, wrong. The purge process is taxing on half-blood physiology. Melissa grabbed the baseball bat from beside her dresser and moved to the doorway, heart hammering. A woman sat in Melissa's reading chair like she'd been invited. Silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Charcoal suit that cost more than Melissa's rent. Skin with that same impossible pallor as the man from the gala. But her eyes were what made Melissa's grip tighten on the bat. Pale gray, ancient, empty of anything human. Who the hell are you? Lydia Thorne. I represent the covenant. The woman's smile was precise, learned. Your locks are irrelevant to me, so threatening police would be pointless. And you, Melissa Ironvale, have 30 days to make a choice that will determine the rest of your very short life. Melissa didn't lower the bat. Get out of my apartment. The poison tonight wasn't meant to kill you. It was a test. Lydia pulled an envelope from her jacket. Cream paper, red wax seal. You passed. Your body responded with remarkable speed for an untrained half-blood, which confirms our suspicions about what you're becoming. And what's that? A threat. Lydia set the envelope on the coffee table. Your mother understood the danger when she chose to become human. She underwent a ritual that severed her connection to our world, making her mortal. Safe. This envelope contains instructions for the same procedure. You have 30 days to comply. Melissa's throat tightened. What if I refuse? Then you'll be contained. Lydia stood with fluid grace. What does that mean? Lydia's smile didn't reach her eyes. We prefer cooperative compliance, Miss Ironvale. The alternative is unpleasant. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you'll receive tonight. Lydia moved toward the door with steps that made no sound. In 30 days, your powers will fully stabilize. After that point, you become too dangerous to approach peacefully. The ritual must happen before then, or we will be forced to act. Choose wisely. And if I fight back? Something flickered in those ancient eyes, amusement, perhaps, or pity. Then you'll discover exactly how many of us there are. Lydia paused at the threshold. And how very, very long we've been making problems disappear. She stepped into the hallway and vanished into shadow, leaving only cold air and the envelope with its red wax seal. Melissa sank to the floor, bat clattering beside her, staring at the cream-colored paper that held her future hostage. 30 days to surrender everything she'd just discovered about herself, or face an unpleasant alternative she wasn't allowed to understand. Her phone buzzed. A text from Garrick. We need to talk. Tomorrow.
Please.
Melissa looked at the envelope, then at her grandfather's message, and felt something cold settle in her chest. He'd seemed worried lately, evasive, like he was waiting for something terrible to happen. And now it had. For the first time since he'd found her in that shelter, Melissa wondered if the man who'd saved her had known this was coming all along. The police report arrived in a manila folder that smelled like 18 years of dust. Melissa had requested it that morning, claiming she needed closure. The records clerk had given her a sympathetic look and handed over 32 pages that were about to crack her world open. Page 14 contained the vehicle inspection. The mechanic's notes were clinical, brake line failure due to severe corrosion, consistent with age and road salt exposure. But in the margin, different handwriting, different ink, corrosion pattern unusual. Appears chemical rather than environmental. Recommend further analysis. No analysis had ever been done. Melissa flipped to witness statements. 2 people reported seeing the car veer off the highway. But the third witness, a truck driver named Robert Collins, described something else. Black sedan forced them off-road. Deliberate. Watched them go over embankment, didn't stop. No license plates. The officer's note beneath. Witness credible but details inconsistent with evidence. Rain/darkness compromised visibility. No supporting evidence of second vehicle. Not pursued. Not pursued because no one had looked. Melissa searched for Robert Collins. Found an obituary from 6 years ago. Heart attack at 52. Convenient. Someone knocked on her office door. It's me. Garrick's voice. May I come in? Melissa shoved the report into her drawer and unlocked the door. Her grandfather looked like he hadn't slept. His platinum hair disheveled, his normally perfect appearance showing cracks. He held a leather portfolio, probably arguments for why she should take the ritual. "You want to talk about the Covenant's offer," Melissa said flatly. "I want to talk about keeping you alive." His voice held desperate edges. "The ritual isn't punishment. It's protection. Your mother chose it for good reasons." "My mother chose that for herself. I'm 18. I get to choose for myself." "Not when those choices get you killed." Garrick stepped closer, genuine fear in his eyes. "You don't understand what the Covenant will do if you refuse. The ritual is the only way to guarantee safety." "Safety." Melissa's voice went cold. "That's what Sophia said. Locking me in basements was for my safety. Keeping me from you is protection." She met his gaze. "Funny how everyone who wants to control me claims it's for my own good." Garrick flinched. "Sophia was stealing from you. I'm trying to save your life. By making me give up the only thing that could protect me?" Melissa crossed her arms. "What aren't you telling me, Garrick? Everything you need to know. I've been looking into my parents' deaths." She pulled out the police report. The real story. And things don't add up. Chemical deterioration on brake lines. A witness who saw them forced off the road. Details that were dismissed without investigation. The color drained from Garrick's face. "Where did you get that?" "Public records." Melissa's hands steadied. "So tell me, why would someone want my parents' deaths to look like an accident?" Silence stretched between them. "Take the ritual," Garrick whispered. "Please, Melissa. Trust me. Take it and let the past stay buried." There it was, evasion wrapped in concern, control disguised as care. Exactly like Sophia. "Get out of my office." "Melissa, get out." He left without another word. Melissa sat alone with a police report full of holes and the sinking certainty that the man who'd saved her had been lying about everything that mattered. The storage facility was in a part of town Melissa had never visited. Industrial, forgotten, the kind of place where seized assets went to gather dust while legal proceedings ground forward. Unit 247 was crammed with Sophia's confiscated life. Designer furniture wrapped in plastic. Boxes labeled Miami Condo and Spain Villa. The Range Rover's custom floor mats stacked beside crates of expensive wine. Melissa had gotten the access code from Catherine Yates, who'd raised an eyebrow but hadn't asked questions. The DA cleared it. "Technically, it's all part of your recovered assets. Just be careful what you're looking for." Melissa hadn't known what she was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Proof of how deeply Sophia's greed ran. Something to make sense of 18 years of cruelty. What she found was so much worse. The box was at the back of the unit, unmarked and sealed with packing tape that had yellowed with age. Inside, everything was chaos. Newspaper clippings stuffed between manila folders, photographs paper-clipped to handwritten notes, symbols drawn on loose pages in increasingly frantic handwriting. The first clipping was from 15 years ago. Local man dies in suspicious accident. Daniel's obituary, circled in red ink. Beside it, a wedding photo of her parents, and someone had drawn excess over Lauren's eyes. The second clipping, series of unexplained deaths puzzle authorities. 5 people over 3 years, all found in what looked like accidents. All had one thing in common. They'd been investigating what the article called unusual activity in the historic district where the Iron Vale estate's at. Someone had written in the margin, "They know. They're watching. They kill anyone who asks questions." Melissa's hands trembled as she pulled out a folder labeled Evidence, Do Not Destroy. Inside were photographs. Blurry, taken from distance, but unmistakable. Figures outside the Iron Vale estate at night, pale, unnaturally still, dressed in clothes from another era. One photo showed a man with platinum blonde hair standing in the garden.
Garrick.
Beneath the photo, Sophia's handwriting, faded with age. Same face as wedding photos. Same face in society pages from 1987. Hasn't aged at all. Not human. More pages. Drawings of symbols that matched the Iron Veil crest. A family tree with Lauren's name circled and the word changed written beside it. Notes about vampire mythology, most of it wrong, but some disturbingly accurate. And then, at the bottom of the box, a journal. The first entry was dated 3 months after Daniel's death. The break lines were cut. I know they were. The police won't listen, but I know. Something killed my brother. Something connected to that woman he married. I found books in their house after the funeral. Old books. Books about things that shouldn't exist. I'm taking Melissa. I have to protect her. If they find out she exists, they'll kill her too. I'll keep her hidden.
Keep her safe.
Whatever it takes. Melissa flipped forward. The entries became more fragmented, more paranoid.
Saw one of them outside the house last night.
Watching. They know she's here. Have to move her to the basement. Can't risk them seeing her through windows. The money keeps coming. $2 million so far. He thinks I'm spending it on her education, but I can't let her go to school. Can't let her be visible. The money buys silence. Buys time. Keeps them from looking too closely. She asked about her mother today. Had to tell her Lauren was evil.
Cursed.
Better she hates them than tries to find them. Safer if she's afraid. The final entry was from 6 months before Melissa turned 18. She's almost grown. Almost free of my guardianship. When she turns 18, I can't legally keep her anymore. But I can't let her go to them either. Better she's on the streets. Better she's invisible. At least on the streets, they won't find her. At least she'll be alive. The journal slipped from Melissa's hands. Sophia hadn't just been stealing from her. She'd been terrified. Genuinely, consumingly terrified of the supernatural world that had killed her brother. And in her fear and grief and madness, she'd convinced herself that abuse was protection, that poverty was safety, that making Melissa invisible and powerless was the only way to keep her alive. The cruelty had been real. The theft had been real. But so had the terror. Sophia had known fragments of the truth, enough to understand that vampires existed, that they'd killed Daniel, that they might come for Melissa. Not enough to understand why or how to actually protect her. Just enough to drive her mad trying. Melissa sat on the concrete floor surrounded by evidence of her aunt's unraveling mind and felt something shift in her understanding of the past 18 years. Sophia hadn't locked her in the basement because she was evil. She'd locked her there because she thought the monsters outside were worse. And looking at the evidence spread around her, the deaths, the surveillance, the pattern of anyone who got too close to vampire secrets ending up in accidents, Melissa had to admit Sophia hadn't been entirely wrong. The monsters had been real all along. She'd just been living with one of them for the past 6 months, calling him grandfather, trusting him to tell her the truth. The key had been inside Daniel's old watch, the one possession of her father's that Sophia hadn't sold or thrown away, probably because it was cheap and broken. Melissa had found it while going through the box of her parents' things that Garrick had saved from the house. The watch hadn't worked in 15 years. But when she'd pried open the back casing, a small silver key had fallen into her palm. Stamped on it, Secure Store number 1847. Los Angeles. The facility was 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of anonymous place where people stored secrets they didn't want found. The manager barely glanced at Melissa's ID before handing over the access card. Unit's been paid through 2030, he said. Whoever set it up really didn't want it touched. Unit 1847 was temperature-controlled, which should have been her first clue that what was inside mattered. 3 boxes, carefully labeled in her father's handwriting. Evidence A, Evidence B, For Melissa, if. She opened evidence of first. Surveillance photographs, dozens of them. Pale figures standing outside her parents' house at night. The same figures appearing near Daniel's office, near the grocery store her mother used, near Melissa's daycare. Always watching. Always at a distance. Always with that same unnatural stillness. One photo showed the man from the gala, the one who'd poisoned her, standing across the street from their home in broad daylight, wearing sunglasses and a hat, but unmistakably the same person. The photo was dated 3 weeks before her parents died. Evidence B was worse. Documentation spanning 40 years. Newspaper clippings of accidents, car crashes, house fires, drownings. All involving people who'd gotten too close to asking questions about the Ironvale family or other prominent families in the historic district. Each accident had an investigative report attached. And in every single one, someone had highlighted the same details: brake line corrosion, chemical deterioration pattern or electrical fire, accelerant traces dismissed as inconclusive or drowning, contusions inconsistent with accidental fall. Patterns. Signatures. Proof that these weren't accidents at all. They were assassinations made to look random. And her parents' deaths matched the pattern exactly. Melissa's hands were shaking as she reached for the third box. Inside was a letter, sealed in plastic to preserve it, addressed in her father's careful script, for Melissa. Open only if your mother and I are gone. She broke the seal. My dearest Melissa, if you're reading this, it means they succeeded in silencing us.
I'm so sorry.
You deserve to grow up with parents who could watch you become whoever you were meant to be. Your mother told me the truth 6 months after you were born, about what she was, about what you might become, about the world that would see your existence as a threat to their secrecy. I didn't run. I didn't fear her. I loved her more for trusting me with the truth. But I'm not naive. I'm a researcher by training, and what I researched terrified me. The Covenant, that's what they call themselves, has spent centuries eliminating anyone who threatens to expose them. They've perfected the art of making murder look like accident. When I realized they were watching our house, watching you, I started gathering evidence. Not to expose them, that would get us killed faster. But as insurance, as proof, as leverage if they ever moved against us. If you're reading this, the leverage failed. But the evidence survived. Melissa, you are not cursed. You are not a monster. You are proof that their world doesn't have to stay hidden, that vampires and humans can create something beautiful together. Your mother chose to become human so you could have a choice she never had, to live in both worlds or neither, or forge something entirely new. Don't let them erase that choice. Don't let them make you small and powerless because it's convenient for their control. The evidence in these boxes is your inheritance, your weapon, your proof that they've been killing people for decades to maintain their secrets. Use it wisely. Use it to survive. Use it to make them see that erasing you would cost them more than letting you live. You are loved, Melissa. You are loved. And you are stronger than any of them want you to believe. Your father always, Daniel. Melissa read the letter 3 times before the words fully settled. Her father had known what her mother was, what Melissa might become, what dangers stalked their family. And he hadn't run. He'd gathered evidence. He'd built leverage. He'd tried to protect them the only way a human could, with truth. And they'd killed him anyway. But they hadn't found this, hadn't destroyed the proof, hadn't silenced the truth he died protecting. Melissa carefully packed the boxes into her car, her father's letter pressed against her chest like armor. She finally had proof, had leverage, had the weapon her father had built for exactly this moment. And she knew exactly who she needed to confront with it. Garrick had 30 days to convince her to take the ritual. She'd give him 30 seconds to explain why he'd never told her that her parents were murdered. Melissa didn't call ahead, didn't text, just drove to the Iron Vale estate with 3 boxes of evidence in her trunk and 15 years of lies burning in her chest. The staff tried to stop her at the entrance. She walked past them like they didn't exist. Garrick was in his study, standing by the window with a glass of something dark that he wasn't drinking. He turned when she entered, and whatever he saw on her face made him set the glass down carefully. "Melissa?" She dropped the first box on his desk. Photographs spilled out, pale figures watching her childhood home, the same faces appearing across decades, surveillance that had started before she was born. "My father was a researcher," she said, her voice steady and cold. "Did you know that? He liked solving puzzles. And when he realized vampires were watching his family, he started documenting everything." Garrick's face had gone carefully blank. "Where did you find?" "Storage unit. Rented under a fake name. Paid through 2030. She dropped the second box. Newspaper clippings scattered across the desk. 40 years of accidents. Car crashes. Fires. Drownings. All with the same forensic inconsistencies. All involving people who asked too many questions about your world. She pulled out her parents' accident report and slapped it on top of the pile. Chemical deterioration on the brake lines. Witness who saw them forced off the road. Details dismissed without investigation. Her hands were shaking now. My parents' deaths matched the pattern exactly. Every single detail. "Melissa, please. Did you know?" The question came out raw. "When you got the call that your daughter was dead, that there'd been an accident, did you know it was murder?" The silence stretched too long. "Did you know?" she repeated louder. "Yes." The word fell like a stone. "I knew within 3 days." Something cracked in Melissa's chest. "You knew. For 15 years, you knew someone murdered my parents, and you never." The covenant doesn't answer to anyone. Garrick's 5 centuries of composure was fracturing. They ordered Lauren's death as punishment for choosing humanity, for proving that our kind could walk away. Daniel was collateral, a human who knew too much. I received notification of their ruling the same week your parents died. Notification. Melissa's voice shook. "They told you they murdered your daughter, and you did nothing?" I couldn't. For the first time, Garrick looked old. Covenant law forbids interference in their justice. Speaking against their ruling would have meant my execution and yours. I had to choose, die trying to avenge Lauren, guaranteeing you'd be killed as a loose end, or stay silent and keep you alive. So, you let me grow up thinking it was an accident. I let you grow up hidden, invisible, safe. Garrick moved closer. Sophia's paranoia was useful camouflage. As long as she kept you locked away, powerless, the Covenant had no reason to look for you. I sent money to ensure you survived, but I kept my distance because any connection between us would have painted a target on your back. You let me suffer in poverty for 6 months before finding me. I let you suffer in poverty for 18 years. His voice broke. Because a girl sleeping in shelters, wearing donated clothes, completely removed from vampire society, that girl was invisible to the Covenant. That girl got to live. Melissa stared at him. The rescue wasn't mercy. It was calculated. Everything I've done has been calculated. Garrick's hands clenched at his sides. The distance. The money instead of presence. Even finding you when I did, I waited until you were 18, legally independent, old enough that I could bring you into the estate without raising questions about a hidden child. I saved you from Sophia's greed and prayed the Covenant wouldn't notice. But they did notice. Because you thrived, built influence, became visible. Everything Lauren wanted for you, everything I tried to give you by bringing you home, it made you a target. His voice dropped to a whisper. I saved you from Sophia, Melissa. But I let your parents die. And now the Covenant wants to erase you for the same crime that got Lauren killed, existing as proof their world can change. Melissa looked at her grandfather. The man who destroyed Sophia, restored her inheritance, given her a foundation and a future. The man who'd also stayed silent while his daughter was murdered and let his granddaughter believe it was an accident for 15 years. Did you love her? She asked quietly. My mother. Did you actually love her? Or was she just another piece of Iron Veil legacy to protect? I loved her more than 5 centuries of existence. Tears tracked down Garrick's pale face. And I failed her, just like I'm failing you. Melissa picked up her father's letter from the box and held it out. My father knew what you were, knew what my mother was.
And he didn't run.
He gathered evidence to protect us. He tried to fight back the only way a human could. Her voice hardened. He had more courage than you did. Garrick flinched like she'd struck him. You have a choice to make now, Melissa said. Help me fight the Covenant with this evidence, or watch me do it alone. If you fight them, they'll kill you. They're going to try anyway. She met his eyes. At least this way, I go down fighting instead of erased. Outside, thunder rumbled. Inside, the weight of 15 years of silence finally shattered between them, and neither of them noticed Melissa's eyes beginning to glow. The moment Garrick's confession left his lips, something inside Melissa broke open. Not shattered. Opened. Heat flooded her veins like ignition, and the study's lights exploded in cascades of sparks. Windows cracked from frame to sill. The air itself seemed to vibrate with pressure that had nowhere to go. Garrick stumbled backward. Melissa, you need to calm. Calm. Her voice came out layered, resonant, not quite human. You let my parents die, and you want me to be calm? Her eyes weren't flickering anymore. They blazed solid silver, bright enough to cast shadows across the centuries-old tapestries. She was a beacon now, visible to every vampire within 100 miles. And the Covenant had been waiting for exactly this. They came through the front entrance like a military operation, 6 figures in dark suits moving with inhuman synchronization. Lydia Thorne led them, her expression clinical as she surveyed the shattered study. Melissa Ironveil, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your 30 days have expired early. You're coming with us. Like hell she is. Garrick moved between them and Melissa, and for the first time she saw what 5 centuries of power actually looked like. His eyes had gone completely black. You'll have to go through me. That can be arranged. Lydia's smile was knife-sharp. Stop. Melissa's voice rang with authority she didn't know she possessed. Everyone just stop. She stepped forward, past Garrick's protective stance, and the enforcers tensed. But she wasn't running, wasn't cowering. She was advancing. In one hand, she held her father's documentation, 40 years of proof that the Covenant had been murdering people to maintain their secrecy. In the other, her mother's pendant, the iron veil crest gleaming silver against her palm. You want to contain me, Melissa said, her voice steady despite the power still crackling under her skin. Erase me. Make me another accident that never gets investigated, just like you did to my parents. Your existence violates. I know what I violate. I've read the laws. The mandate of separation. The price for choosing humanity over immortality. She held up the documentation. I've also read 40 years of murder disguised as accident. People who ask questions. People who got too close to your secrets. People whose deaths were ruled natural or accidental while you pulled the strings. Lydia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her ancient eyes. My father gathered this before you killed him, Melissa continued. Names.
Dates.
Forensic evidence. Patterns that even human investigators would recognize if they looked closely enough. He built it as insurance, as leverage, as proof that you've been operating above human law for decades. If you release that evidence, you destroy us all, Lydia said quietly. Including yourself. I know. Melissa met her gaze. Which is why I'm not releasing it. I'm offering you a deal. The study went absolutely silent. I'll keep your secrets, Melissa said. I'll prevent exposure. I'll make sure this evidence never sees daylight. But in exchange, you will abolish the laws that made my parents' murder legal. You will recognize half-bloods as legitimate members of vampire society. And you will create oversight for your justice system, because enforcement without accountability is just tyranny with better PR. You're in no position to make demands. I'm in the only position that matters. Melissa's eyes blazed brighter. I'm the half-blood daughter of a vampire who chose humanity and a human who chose to love her anyway. I'm living proof that your world can change. And you have two options. Accept that change, or I flood every media outlet, every police department, every investigative journalist with evidence that will raise questions you can't answer without exposing yourselves. You destroy the foundation your mother built, Lydia said. Everything she sacrificed for. My mother sacrificed herself, so I could have a choice. Melissa's voice didn't waver. She wanted me to live in both worlds, to be powerful and free, to forge something new. I'm honoring that by refusing to let you erase me and refusing to burn down the legacy she died protecting. I'm offering you a third option, evolution. She stepped closer, close enough that the enforcers tensed but didn't move. Half-bloods exist. We're going to keep existing. You can spend centuries trying to eliminate us and risking exposure every time, or you can adapt. Create legal pathways for those who want to leave. Recognize that love between your kind and humans isn't betrayal. It's proof your species can survive in the modern world without hiding. Garrick was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Lydia's expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then she glanced at the documentation in Melissa's hand, at the silver blazing in her eyes, at the young woman who should have been powerless and terrified but stood there demanding a seat at the table instead. The Covenant doesn't negotiate with. The Covenant, Melissa interrupted, is about to have a very public problem if you finish that sentence. So, I suggest you start negotiating. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Lydia Thorne smiled, a real smile this time, with something like respect in her ancient eyes. The council will want to meet you, she said quietly. Personally. Good. Melissa didn't lower the evidence. Because I have a lot more demands where these came from. 3 months later, the Iron Veil Foundation's headquarters had a new floor dedicated to transition services. Melissa stood in the modern conference room, reviewing applications from half-bloods seeking legal recognition, vampires wanting to explore human relationships, and humans who discovered the supernatural world and needed guidance instead of memory alteration. The Covenant had agreed to a pilot program. Limited oversight. Gradual reforms. It wasn't everything Melissa wanted, but it was a beginning. News of the Covenant reforms had reached even the state prison where Sophia was serving her sentence. Melissa had received a letter last week, her aunt's handwriting on the envelope, shaky and desperate. She hadn't opened it. Maybe someday. But not yet. Some wounds needed time before they could be examined, let alone healed. The council confirmed your appointment, Garrick said from the doorway. He looked older somehow, despite immortality. Humbled. You're officially the first half-blood liaison to the Covenant. They've never created that position before. They've never had to before. Melissa set down the applications. How does it feel, watching your granddaughter force 5 centuries of tradition to change? Terrifying. He stepped into the room. And extraordinary. Your mother would be so proud. My mother would be alive if the covenant had let her choose differently without punishment. I know. Garrick's voice cracked. I'll spend the rest of my immortality trying to make that right. Melissa looked at her grandfather, complicit, flawed, but trying. She'd never fully forgive him for his silence. But she'd learned something from her father's letter. Love and failure could exist in the same person. Help me build something better, she said. Not as my savior, as my equal. Help me make sure no other family gets destroyed for choosing love over laws. Garrick met her silver eyes, permanent now, a mark of power she'd claimed instead of surrendered. It would be my honor, he said quietly. Outside, the city glowed with evening lights. Half-bloods walked streets they no longer had to hide in. And somewhere, Melissa imagined her parents watching, her mother who'd chosen mortality for her daughter's freedom, her father who died protecting truth. She'd honored them both. Not by choosing one world or the other, but by demanding both worlds change to make room for her. Powerful.
Free.
Unafraid. Exactly the legacy they died hoping she'd become. If Melissa's fight to claim her legacy moved you, show your support by hitting that like button. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this and share this video. Thanks for watching.